Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Beyond the Wire podcast. I am your host, Tim Keller. Along with me, as he always is my wonderful co-host, Mr. Matt Disher. And we have a fantastic guest. We have Mrs. Ashley Gorbulja-Maldonado with us today. You can hear her over on the American Legion podcast. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Awesome. And we'll get into her as we do all of our guests here very shortly. But we always like to start every episode with some recent events, some news. We like to reach out to military.com because, it's a military-based podcast. And Matt and I were talking a little bit before we jumped on. And, obviously, both former Marines. This one popped out to both of us. The article was titled 7 Reasons Why Marines Love Chesty Puller So Much. And, I mean, I'm glad they whittled it down to 7 because I'm sure there's like 7,000. If you don't know who Chesty Puller is, pick up a book. No, Chesty Puller is the most decorated Marine of all time. He does not have a Medal of Honor, but if you put his medals up, I don't know too many people that could sit there and actually stand up wearing all that metal and all those ribbons on their chest.
Well, he was awarded 5 Navy Crosses, 1 Army Distinguished Service Cross, along with the Silver Star, 2 Legions of Merit with Combat Vs, a Bronze Star with the Combat V, and 3 Air Medals. Let's go through this list real quick.
Yeah.
So the 7 reasons. This is the 7 reasons why Marines love Chesty Puller so much. Now, bear in mind, in boot camp, whenever we would turn the lights off at Parris Island, somebody would randomly say, somebody would randomly call out, "Good night, Chesty Puller," wherever you are. Or if a door would like open and slam by itself, like the wind was blowing through the squad bay or something like that, somebody would always look up and say, "Chesty, is that you?" So it was the spirit of Chesty Puller. So Chesty Puller, number 1, he's relatable to every Marine, no matter who you are. And I'm not going to go through these completely in their completeness, but
this talks about he was enlisted and then he was an officer. He actually pinned on lieutenant bars. Yeah. And then the war ended, so they demoted him back down to corporal, I believe.
Yep. Yeah, so he has been everybody's Marine. He's been the Marine that every other Marine has been. Mm-hmm. So 37 years of service. He served in 4 wars. So think about that. Just being in 4 different conflicts, and in these turbulent times in the United States. As I mentioned, he really is the most decorated Marine. He was not ever nominated or awarded the Medal of Honor, but he does have the Marine Corps', he has 5 of the Marine Corps' second highest awards, along with a bunch of other ones that I just mentioned. He's also the most quotable Marine, saying things such as, "All right, they're on our left, they're on our right, they're in front of us, they're behind us, they can't get away this time." So as there are many quotes in Marine Corps history or Marine Corps folklore, great, we're surrounded, we know where they are, etc. So let's just shoot in every direction. So again, great. Now we can shoot at those bastards from every direction. That's another Chesty Puller quote. And "Take me to the brig. I want to see the real Marines." The brig being jail for military. But Chesty was, again, the Marines' Marine. He didn't let his fellow Marines down. Chesty Puller did not accept defeat. And it was his intensity and his fighting style that led him to be, the Marine of lore. I think he was mentioned in the Pacific, the series The Pacific. I think Chesty Puller at some point in time, his character walks by the crew and they're like, "Hey, that's Colonel Puller." And that was a pretty fun Easter egg if you've ever watched that 10-part series. And then Chesty Puller was not intimidated by anything. So, and he's quoted to saying, being surrounded by Chinese and North Korean troops in the Korean War, "We've been looking for the enemy for some time now. We finally found him. We're surrounded. That simplifies things." Mm-hmm. So he was not scared. Good day, Chesty Puller, wherever you are.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. If you've ever spent almost any time in Parris Island, I'm sure you've seen pictures of Mr. Puller, Lieutenant General Puller, and heard some stories. So he's someone that is just kind of thrown at you from day one as you're indoctrinated into the Marine Corps, and You know, it's that story that everybody, here's the Marine to shoot for. Here's the guy to try to be. Speaking of people to try to be more like, there's an article up here on military.com. She was a pioneering Navy submarine officer. Now she's headed to space. Lieutenant Commander Caleb Barron was one of the first women to serve on a naval submarine and is now one step closer to becoming the first woman to walk on the moon. She is a 33-year-old female naval officer who in 2010 was selected by NASA out of a pool of approximately 18,000 people to join the 2017 astronaut candidate class. So first, I want to say, thank you for your service. But serving on a naval submarine, I don't think personally I would be cut out for sub life. That is a very enclosed, tight-quartered living situation that I don't think I would thrive well in. I would not like, my 6 inches on each side of me going through every doorway, 6 inches above my head, making sure I'm not tripping as I'm going through these doorways as well. And it's the same, 80 people that you're seeing every day and night. Very, very special breed of humans it takes to serve on submarines, and then even another notch above that, people that can go on and become astronauts. Again, never been on any sort of spacecraft myself personally. I haven't been lucky enough to have been chosen and abducted by alien life yet. It's coming one of these days, maybe. But I would imagine that a sub and, NASA, like the space station or a spaceship would be similar, that the tight quarters, the living conditions. So I bet she's ready for it. She's built for it. I thought this was a very incredible article, though, for being 33 years old, being one of the very first females to ever serve on a sub, and now she's going to space. That's a great accomplishment. So congratulations to Lieutenant Commander Caleb Barron.
These are amazing stories, because whenever I think I've accomplished something exceptional in my career, then somebody comes along who, is not only in the submarine service, but now is going to be an astronaut. There's many stories of this. I say it all the time. The people who serve in the military, in the U.S. military, are some of the most exceptional human beings I've ever seen or met in my entire life. And a lot of that is the availability of experiences, but it gives you access to so many things. And these are well-accomplished people. They are the next generation of America's leaders, or they are always America's leaders, but they're the next generation, as I say.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The third article I have pulled up here off military.com is Israel cites progress in lasers that can shoot down drones. So
lasers.
Yeah, frickin' lasers. So not only do they have that, the Iron Dome system, which was said to have a 90% interception rate.
Yep.
In that 11-day war, as the rockets were being fired from Gaza. What was that, last month or so?
Yep.
But now they have this laser system to shoot down, drones. So in a recent test, the system shot down drones within a range of about 1 kilometer or about 0.6 miles. In coming years, Israel hopes to deploy ground-based systems with a range of 5 to 6 miles that can intercept rockets, mortar rounds, and drones. So it is a fascinating technology that Israel is coming up with and testing and deploying. But yeah, frickin' lasers.
Have you noticed that like every conversation we've had in the last couple of weeks or last couple of months has involved drones or some sort of automated system at some point?
Well, that's why I brought this up. Is we've constantly been bringing up drones or unmanned aircraft and the technological advances that the military is putting out there. Yeah. And then I saw this one, and it's anti-drone, essentially weaponry.
Well, we're getting ready for Skynet. Yeah, we're getting ready for the Terminator 2.
Yeah.
I mean, because
next wave.
They've got the robots. They got the robot dogs. Now they have their first unmanned. They have their first automated drone. So I guess the trigger was not pulled by a human, right? Isn't that the story we read last time or 2 weeks ago?
Yeah,
and it was
autonomous,
totally autonomous drone. It had its first combat kill or something along those lines. So next, it's going to be self-aware. And thank God the the Israelis are developing laser systems to shoot them down because we're going to need those pretty soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and the last one, this has nothing to do with military, but this is just an article that I saw and I thought was not necessarily fascinating. It made me question myself. Over in London, there is now a see-through pool 10 stories in the air. And I don't know if I could personally, swim in such a thing. I'm going to post this up here and share my screen quickly. If you see, this is 10 stories up in the air. It is a see-through pool. And you can swim. People on the ground can see you. You can see through it. Could either of you swim across something like this? It is about 82-foot pool in total. I believe 40 some feet of it is suspended in the air.
I'd have to understand. I'd have to understand how this thing was engineered, and like, was it built by the lowest bidder, or you know what I mean? Because if you think about a swimming pool, that's a lot of gallons of water. That's a very heavy. That has to be a structure that supports a lot of weight. And then what happens if you're in that during an earthquake? You're halfway across and a small earthquake hits, and then the glass cracks. I don't know. Unnecessary risk, maybe. YOLO, as they say.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Not for me.
I would do it.
You think so?
I would do it. Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it would be really existentially trippy because you're like looking up at the sky, you're suspended in water, and then you're also like looking down. So it would be like kind of the ultimate kind of like mind bender. Mm-hmm. It would probably be something I probably would just have to jump in and not think about like where it is in space and place. And then like once like, cause I'm like blind. So like, it's not like I can really see underwater anyway. Like I'd have to have contacts and goggles in anyway. Yeah. So if I have all of the right perfect conditions, I'd probably definitely like check it out. It'd be really trippy, but I probably would do it like once. It'd be one and done. Then I'd be like poolside ordering a drink. Like, okay. That would be me.
As I was scrolling through some of the pictures, I saw one where I'm sure this is just for a photo op, but they have one female swimmer in the pool and she's kind of floating on her back. That I think I could pull off because like you said, Ashley, you're just kind of looking up at the sky. Anytime I'm in a pool, if I'm going to sit here and do the backstroke, I'm just looking up at the sky. I could convince myself, hey, I'm not any necessarily closer to the sky, even though I'm 10 stories in the air. If I was, doing lap swimming though, and I took a brief second to look down, I mean, what am I doing up here? Like, this is nuts.
Right.
But yeah, I saw this. I think it looks really cool. But I don't know if I could do it. I didn't know if I could pull that off. So just wanted to bring that up and see what you guys thought. But let's get into Ashley now. So Ashley, you are currently working with the VA. You were the founder and CEO of Guide On Education Consulting and the co-host of the American Legion podcast. But let's talk about your service. So what got you interested in the military and made you want to serve to begin with?
So my story starts probably maybe like my freshman year in high school. So when the recession hit, I found that it took a toll on my family. My father's a small businessman in Ohio, manufacturing. So we're in the Rust Belt. And there were a lot of financial pieces that were just kind of tossed into the air. I have two younger brothers. I really wanted to alleviate some, financial burden off of my father and put myself through school. I was an average like AB student. I wasn't like taking advanced AP kids or AP classes like some of the kids today. Like they're just doing way more than I ever thought was possible in high school. But I started doing research and I was looking at active duty. I was looking at the reserves. I was looking at the Guard. And I found myself drawn to the Guard because in Ohio, there is 100% in-state scholarship that would pay for my education, pay for my undergraduate degree, and it would end up paying for 2 of my degrees and a minor. So I saw the National Guard as an opportunity for me to stay close to home, to help take care of my brothers, help the family, but also give me a next leg up from a benefits and a resources standpoint. So this research that I ended up doing, ended up really kind of transforming and pushing me into an accidental advocacy role. I went to school thinking I wanted to be a doctor. I pivoted to physical therapy and then finally found myself in public health. And this was all because of my involvement both with the Legion, working in higher education, which my benefit and resources knowledge came into. I just so very handy. Walked into a community college just to ask a few questions. Next thing I know, I was walking out with a part-time job in military, the military program there at the Metropolitan campus. So I spent my time doing that. So there was just kind of just these weird overlay of opportunities and benefits and resources that propelled me both from a career standpoint. But when I joined the military, I originally wanted to become an officer. I joined our ROTC program. Things didn't work out, and that's okay. To no fault to my own, it was quite the folly. But I ended up becoming military police, and I spent about my first 3 years, had some great mentors who really pushed me. And like I said, became an NCO or non-commissioned officer, sergeant, 3.5 years. And by the time I hit my 6th year, I was an inline staff sergeant.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I saw that you were a military police sergeant with the National Guard. You were in during the Republican National Convention in Cleveland, I assume?
I was, yes. I was on standby for that, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I know that was a pretty big deal, and they were ramping up security measures during that whole situation. So that's awesome. Well, let's talk about, post-military now. So you get done at the National Guard, you've been an MP. Did you ever have that thought, maybe I'll get out and be a civilian police officer?
I had served with a lot of folks who were dually National Guard MPs, and also whether they were state troopers or they were, small-time sheriff or, big city, police officers. And I had spent so much time with those guys and gals that I was like, I don't know if I really want to do this. You hear some of the stories and then you think about it. And the thing was, like, in the National Guard, I always tell folks, it's like you have one foot in, one foot out, and you're constantly in a state of transition. So the National Guard itself, right? So I'm drilling, once a month for however long, and National Guard is changing dramatically, and like how long, it used to be like a weekend and, each month and in 2 weeks. And I can tell you that was never really the case while I was in. And so having this dynamic of both pursuing my education, working in higher education, being involved with the American Legion, and then also, putting my uniform on on the weekend, and then also, being on call for a lot of things. I was like, yeah, I don't know if police is really what I want to do, because I was not pursuing that as my educational goal. So I kind of had peeled back some layers. Like I said, I wanted to become a doctor, realized that I was like, no. I was like, I'm smart enough to get into this, but I don't want to do this. Pivoted to physical therapy. I said, you know what? I'll check out U.S. Army Baylor. Maybe I can direct commission. Maybe that's an opportunity for me. And then I realized I could never get into physical therapy school because I would never have a high enough GRE, and I wasn't willing to wait 4 years to make sure I could look at people with total needs. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just wasn't for me. And then public health was a total Hail Mary for me. So I found myself with all of these scholarships. I was very fortunate. I'm a recipient of the U.S. Army Women's Legacy Scholarship, AMVET Scholarship, American Legion Scholarship. So I had several dollars to throw down. And I had wrote a very passionate letter to the Northeast Ohio Medical University Public Health Program stating hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And they didn't get back to me until the withdrawal date. And I had said, I'm going to take all these electives. I have the dollars. I don't need 100% guarantee from you because I know what I want to do. And they came back and gave me provisional admissions. I started that journey in military, family, and community advocacy through public health. And that's kind of when I knew. So there was somewhere in between 2016 and 18 that I was doing a bunch of stuff with the Legion. I was, working on, raising, funds and dollars, whether it was scholarships or programs through both my district for the Legion, for the state. I was working with the Ohio Department of Veteran Services. I was working with the VA. And that's what I tell folks, like, I got into this accidental advocacy while I was in the service. And that's like one of the perks of, I guess, being in the National Guard is like you can utilize all of the benefits, right? Like they're not the same as active duty, but utilizing the education, utilizing eventually my home loan, buying a house at 24, right? Like all of these different components that really came together and solidified this, again, accidental advocacy role that propelled me into the career that I have today. So to answer your question, like, I thought about becoming a military, becoming a police officer on the outside, but I realized that I had so many different interests. And I was happy that the National Guard gave me an opportunity to explore that while I was in, because I know too often the folly is like when you transition, you either want to do something similar or now you're caught off guard and you want to do a 180 in your transition and you don't know how to do that because now you don't have, say, the prerequisites for lack of a better phrase, and I'll use my education background, but it's how do you get to where you want to be? And for me, I was fortunate enough to have served with folks who were dually doing that. And we're like, Najee, like if you're interested in this stuff, go for that stuff. Like it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
My brother's a police officer. My other brother's an engineer, right? Like we have different interests. And it's funny when I speak to my, civilian side police officer brother, and I'm like, yeah, I'm glad I didn't do this because it wouldn't have been for me.
Yeah.
It's so interesting you say that. I had a similar experience, and I don't take anything away from law enforcement officers. I think it's an impossible job, but I went to take a test for law enforcement. This was right when I left the Marine Corps, and there was not a test or the tests were not available for the local departments that I wanted into. So I took a test instead to be a 911 operator dispatcher. I did that for 4.5 years. And in that period of time, I realized I don't want to do this job that they're doing because it was impossible. It's impossible. And it gets more and more impossible every day. So it's funny that you got that experience before you had to step foot. Because I have a lot of police officer friends and law enforcement friends that once they're in it, it's hard to make a transition out of it. You can't just be like, hey, I'm going to stop doing this and go work in the marketing department at the big company down the street. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Ashley, I think that was very fortunate for you. You're doing this job for the National Guard. You have access to individuals that are doing this job in the civilian sector in their real life, and you got to listen to them, hear their stories, get feedback. So you didn't necessarily go down a road that probably wasn't going to be built for you. You see it with young kids in college. A kid will go to college saying, "Hey, I want to be that person in the marketing department." So they'll go to college and they'll take the courses, and the prerequisites to get some sort of degree in marketing or advertising, things of that nature. And then they find out, 10 years later, this really isn't for me. I should have just. Right. There are tons of people in the civilian workforce that have, they might be doing X, Y, and Z, and their degrees are in A, B, and C. It's right. You're young. You think this is what you want to do. Same thing in the military. You're young. You're like, oh, I want to be a combat engineer. I want to blow things up. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get into it and then you come back out to the civilian workforce and you're like, well, first off, there's not a ton of jobs where I can, translate these, specific skills over to. And then you hopefully land on your feet and find something else you're very good at. So,
right. I think a lot of the skills that for me were very soft skill. And that's something that I was, again, like having the experience of working in higher education and then, pretty much having, transitioning veterans and their dependents come into my office and seek advice gave me a whole different perspective on transition issues, right? It was like really about time and place because folks would get out and they said, well, I waited, I wanted to relax a little bit. And, I either, I retired out or I got out after my first contract or I'm halfway through or I got injured, right? So it really gave me some perspective on one, how to like better take care of my soldiers while I was in the service. And then also like how to navigate my own path from a mentorship perspective and an advisement perspective, like from a college, right? So I, at that point, really kind of had that like awakening, like, I'm not sure if I really like what I'm doing with my degree. And I think that's really common for military folks who,
Yeah.
they're like, hey, I think I really want to do this. I always encourage people, like, go get an internship, like go shadow somewhere, go
Right.
ask questions, find someone, like, I mentor on Veterati. There's other programs and stuff out there that you can have these conversations firsthand with folks who, can bestow the pearls of wisdom that you otherwise may end up learning the hard way and have time and money wasted by using your GI Bill or voc rehab or, any of these programs that are out there to benefit you. And then you're just kind of like, well, I don't know if that was for me. There's a lot of self-exploring that has to be done.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the American Legion podcast. It's Tango Alpha Lima is
That's
the
correct.
podcast for the American Legion. You were one of the co-hosts. How'd you end up in that? How are your co-hosts? How is that whole thing?
So it's like again, accidental advocacy. It's a beautiful kind of thing.
Mhm.
So my journey in the American Legion started while I was still in the service. I joined a post that was in Brunswick, Ohio. I think it was like 234 now, if you think about it. And wow, gosh, that would have been like 2013, 2014. I joined the service 2011. So to give you some perspective. And I had always been around American Legion. They were very, very, very active in my community. And I also, while I was in high school, I did this like community pageant thing. And I know that sounds like super girly because I'm very tomboy and, or very androgynous, right? So I would travel all over the state of Ohio, and I was in like these parades, and I was promoting my community, and I was like talking over cows, and I was like grape stomping in a dress, and I was spending time with like the American Legion. And every parade I was in, there was always an American Legion post. So I always got to hang out with them in the parade line. So it was like this weird kind of serendipitous like foreshadowing of my future of community service. And, naturally when I joined the military, I was like, I'm going to go join the American Legion. Like that was just like 1 and 1 equals 2. Right. And so I am in higher ed. I'm doing all this stuff. I'm meeting all these people, and they're like, oh, you're American Legion member. I go, yeah, why not? And then next thing I know, I'm at the University of Akron, and there's a gentleman there who was a descendant from the Buchtel College, which then became Akron University. And he was a Vietnam officer. He was in service. He ended up donating this beautiful like lounge, and it was just gorgeous. And he was like, I want to start American Legion post on campus. And we were like, oh. So next thing I know, I'm being like recruited to like work at the university again, another part-time job because I had all this benefit knowledge. And then they're like, hey, like, would you be interested in like helping us set up this American Legion post on campus? So here I am, like 2014, 15, 16, all the way up until like, I left Ohio in 2019. I was, a district second vice. I just got voted in. By the time I left, I was a post commander. Some say I might have been the youngest like woman commander in the state of Ohio, maybe in the country, who knows? So I was like 21 years old. So I was a first vice and a commander. And I had the opportunity to create these tenets of engage, educate, and employ. So it was really kind of these 3E and tenets and how we could create programming and foster a second service initiative on campus. So we partnered with the Student Veterans of America. So I got my start at the American Legion doing this stuff, right? So accidental advocacy.
Mhm.
I found a way to help people in my community. And that was what was setting my soul on fire, right? It wasn't like, the health behavior promotion class I was taking. It was like, how can I help people now? How can I set them up for the future they want? And that's what the American Legion was able to do for me. In addition, camaraderie. I got to work with a lot of different people from different branches, different generations, and it really gave me perspective on what the needs were at a microcosm to a macrocosm. And the American Legion, of course, they were like, who's this young whippersnapper? We want her. It was like, what? So the next thing I know, I'm getting like news coverage and stuff from HQ. And this is like 2015, 2016 time range.
Mhm.
I would end up applying for an internship in DC in like 2018. I left all my stuff and I just said, I'm going to go do this thing. And the American Legion in Washington, D.C. picked me up for education and employment division. So I ended up interning with them. So I was working on like federal tuition assistance. I was working on like retirement points. I was working on communications work, all of these things in 2018. So like there's this weird, just kind of linear progression of my involvement and them just really seeking me out to be an advocate for what the American Legion does, because it's really helped me from, just from my own anxiety, depression, things that have happened in my military career. Like they have always been there for me. Like they've helped me with my disability claim. They've helped me, really build bridges in the military, I say like demystifying the military divide, because I just think it's really a big misunderstanding. So all of the bridges that I've been able to help build have been in part, structurally laid by the American Legion. So they just reached out to me and they were like, hey, Ashley, we know you do a lot of cool videos. We know you do a lot of promotion. And we know that you have a lot of awesome things to say. You want to do this podcast? And I was like, okay.
That's awesome. One question I have kind of off script is, it sounds like some of this is being done, but I know when I came out of the military and I had gone to an American Legion post and they got me to sign up, and one of the questions back to me was, how do we get more of your friends, my generation, to come in? So is that a conversation that's happening at large? Because I know that there was some concern for a while that, your American Legion posts were for quite some time dominated by, your Vietnam era generation veterans. And now you have the post 9/11 generation or before that, the Gulf War veterans. And there was some sort of divide there. What's the conversation like? Like what is the American Legion doing to get this generation or this post 9/11 generation in the door?
So that is a very common topic. And I know that has been asked of me, even when I was in my own district and I was going around and, campaigning for, psych advice, right? They're just like, how do we get more folks like you? And I go, well, pull the shades up, turn the lights on, let's get down to work. Like, let's create like family centric programming, right? Like, let's have barbecues where the whole family's involved, right? Let's, let's really dig into what your community, and everyone has like an individual need. Like for our community, it was like, how come we could have tailgates for the football games? We could, have scholarship gala and dinners, or we could partner with SVA, or we could partner with Red, White, and Blue. Like we could, or Team Red, White, and Blue, excuse me. And that's been something that at every conference that I've been to has been a conversation. And we talk about it. And I do believe that we are getting more post 9/11 veterans involved. It's, the way it was described to me in prior was, there was definitely like a space where there was Vietnam veterans. And then it was just like this generation, just kind of like, the influx, they're high in the totem pole. And then as the new generation comes in, it's like slow. But it's just, they grow over time. And that's just like this weird, like kind of, I'm trying to imagine like this, like progressive, like kind of time chart here, but like the next generation, like they always kind of get more involved. That's just how it happens. So like when folks don't see like immediately, like, a whole post, of post 9/11, they're like, they get concerned. I'm like, well, you got to think about where they are in time and place.
Right.
They're starting families. They might be in the height of, they're starting their career, getting established. Even myself, like, they're always like, hey, can you do more? And I'm like, I gotta put a tactical pause because, I'm a young professional. Like eventually I'd like to start a family in the next few years. Like I'm trying to get my financial footing underway, running a business, working for the government, doing all these things, right? Like those things take my time, but like I can, like, you have to be able to like do these little things. And that's what I have to tell them all the time. It's like, I can do little things like podcast. I can do this thing, but that means like, I can't run all these other programs. Right. And I think it's about setting boundaries, especially for any like post 9/11 folks that like want to come in. Right. Like if you want to get involved, go for it. If you want to do a bunch of stuff, go for it, commit to it, have fun with it. Lead your community. And, but if you've got other stuff going on, like, don't dismiss it as a, like, I have to do this when I'm retired thing. I think I find that all the time. And there are so many opportunities where I have, again, fallen back on the Legion for advice or mentorship. And there are so many established folks in the community. I always tell people it's a big network, right? When I go to conventions, like I have friends in California, I've got folks who have done all these things professionally, who are so well connected or have stories to share, or, pearls of wisdom that I otherwise would not have been looking for. So you got to think of it more of just like a large group of folks with, the same value and a second service mission. So, I just encourage folks to volunteer where you can and to get involved.
Yeah. I think you hit it, the nail right on the head there. As individuals were getting out of the military, especially, like myself, you did that one contract and you got out. You're young. You have a million different avenues to try to pursue. You have all those goals still of a young adult. You want to start trying to gain some traction professionally. You want to start trying to get your finances in order. Everybody is looking for a partner to share some life with, and hopefully eventually start a family. As those things all start to fall in place, I think those individuals then go, man, I do miss those days and that camaraderie. And they go, where can I find that? And then, that's when those individuals start to look at places like, the Legion and the VFW and things of that nature. So yeah, I think it just takes some time. You got to let those individuals find their personal footing, and then they'll come back. They'll miss it. Everybody does.
That's usually what happens.
Yeah. And I also thought, so you guys started a Legion on a campus of a college. How rare is that? I can't imagine that a college campus would be necessarily a stronghold for a place like the Legion, And
that's what people initially told us. So what was interesting, and while I was working at a community college and dually at the university, we found that, we would have folks that would come in and they would just kind of hang out in the military service center, right? It's kind of like a safe space kind of place, right? Where like, you're around folks who have seen the same stuff as you, and like, you can, say your piece, and you can, talk smack, vent. You can have these moments of like shared, wow, I'm back on this, or I'm a non-traditional student, and like the kid is the same age as my kid. Like those were conversations that were had. And, when we had this like military lounge, like that was an opportunity for people to kind of congregate. And then we realized we were actually hanging out way more than we thought we would, because we'd be on campus or off schedules. Right. So it was just kind of this perfect storm in a way, for a lack of a better turn of phrase. So they were like, yeah, we want to do this. And at first, like, folks were like, oh, no, I don't have time for that and stuff like that. And then here's how we flipped this. We said, listen, you're in college, you're looking for these prerequisites, right? Like you want to do something completely different than you did in the service, but you have all these soft skills, you have leadership skills. And being an officer, right? Like in the Legion structure, like a first vice, a second vice, like you could be membership chair, you could be marketing, you could be the finance officer. So what we did is we tried to find folks who are pursuing these degrees and give them an opportunity to build a portfolio and say, like, I managed inaugural American Legion on campus to do X, Y, and Z. We raised, $100,000 in the first 5 years. We gave X back, right? Like those are all structured bullet points that you would put on an NCOER, right? Yeah. Or evaluation. So that, and it opened opportunities for internships, right? Because then we talk about the network of the Legion. So we've got, professionals at all different ages, or folks who know folks. We're like, oh yeah, I own this company and I'm retired now, but hey, I can get you shadow, or you can go and try an internship, right? Or like we found that with a lot of the folks that was an avenue that would work. And they said, oh, I didn't think about it that way. And I was like, well, you're already here. You have this gap in between your evening class and your morning class. Like you could just go hang out in the lounge and, do what you can. Don't overdo it. Or membership, right? We were already going for the Military Services Center on campus to some of these events. It was too easy to put a Legion thing down and also put a Student Veterans of America thing down and say, hey, come join these groups, get these resources. Like your next goal is employment. Our goal is to help you. So that was kind of like the sale pitch in a way, and it worked for folks. Wow. And unfortunately, just like it's just this misconception of like what the Legion is and what people perceive it to be. And unfortunately, there are some posts that are still in this kind of bubble, but most are not. They're out in the community. They're having oh gosh, like we're doing 100 miles for hope, which is great. It's just this huge national initiative. People are getting active. We're moving. We've got folks that are doing like little 5Ks. Now that things are starting to open up, we were doing virtual. Like there were so many posts that stepped up in the community, right? From food banks to donations to just making things happen that otherwise wouldn't, because these are people who care about their community. And like I said, it really is second service. So for the folks at the college, this was an opportunity for them to utilize the resources and branch off. And what was remarkable is a lot of the folks that were officers or did stuff actually stayed within the district locally. And now they're in some capacity running their local posts where they live. Because the whole point was like, we don't expect folks to just stay in that post once they move, right? Like myself, like I got an opportunity out in Washington, D.C. Like I've switched posts, but it doesn't mean that I don't give love back to my original post. It doesn't mean that I don't stop, calling my mentors at the University of Akron or, call my friends in Ohio, because they're all doing really great stuff and they're continuing, like I said, second service.
Oh. Yeah, I didn't think about that part of it too. Yeah, it's going to be a pretty big turnover through there. You're going to get new individuals into that post on a constant basis, new ideas, fresh ideas.
Yeah.
And that's a good breeding ground for ideas and initiatives. And they can, as they move on with their lives, hopefully they stay in the Legion and take them to their new posts. And
absolutely.
That's awesome. So then you it looks like you founded Guide on Education Consulting. Let's talk about that a little bit. It says here you serve as a strategic guide for leadership teams and contractors in a way that promotes your organization's culture, vision, and oversees the progress of operations and events planning. So how did this come about? What was your goal here?
So I've described a lot of these events, a lot of these things that have happened in my 8-year career. And I found myself in a position where I was always educating and helping folks connect and communicate with the military connected community. And there was just this very natural bridge, again, of demystifying the military experience, military divide, however you want to call it. And I thought to myself, like, as a communications, like marketing and education professional, like, how can I help folks get us, right? How do I help us tell our stories, get us to where we want to be? So my mantra is kind of like, I can and will watch me. I've had a lot of people like tell me, no, you can't do those things, or it's never been done. I was like, oh, challenge accepted. Yep. So when I started the business, I was at my internship in Washington, D.C. I received a lot of mentorship from the American Legion Education Employment Division, a lot in which were like, hey, we've got connections with SBA. Like, you've got some really great ideas. Like, you should really capitalize on this. Like, you build great content. You can help people really reach the audience that they want. I said, oh, that's a really good point. So next thing I know, I'm like taking an Uber out to Fort Meade to like do the Boots for Business course while I'm out here. And I'm just kind of exploring and networking and resources and just getting some mentorship from some first time entrepreneurs and some seasoned, CEOs. And I thought, wow, I could really do this. So in September 2018, I started Guide on Education Consulting, and the premise is like Guide on in the military is, the banner that is in front and is in all branches. That is really this rally point, right? Or, just something you take a lot of pride in symbolically, right? And then the Guide on play on words is like, I'm guiding you on military spouses. I'm guiding you on education. I'm guiding you on or employment, communication. You fill in the blank, insert here, right? Kind of thing. So I build, programs. I build military programs. I build communities. I build people. So by helping contractors, helping nonprofits. One of the more exciting contracts that I worked on more recently was the Military Women's Memorial. And I never thought 2 years into business and all my advocating, whether it was on LinkedIn and the things I was passionate about, would all combined. And the folks there saw the possibilities and brought me on for a short-term contract. So I'm really happy to say that I was able to help them with their marketing plan, their rebrand, their national registration campaign to share women veteran stories. Right. So never would have thought in a million years that year 2 out the gate, I'd be working with the Women's Military Memorial right outside of Arlington. And it's exciting because now I have other opportunities, and I'm helping other, small business, in the military spouse community, folks who just need some assistance. And it's great to be able to do that. So I also, subcontract out with other veteran owned businesses, military spouse owned businesses, because I can't do it all myself. And I think there's a lot of power in a team, right? I come from military police stock. I know you can't accomplish one thing. You can't bust down a door all by yourself. I mean, depends on who you ask, but so I've been able to like bring folks in for videography and photography and really just kind of uplift the community, right? Like there's plenty of pieces of pie, right? And I want us all to share it. So for me, it's not like, oh, I want to, scale to this huge level. Like I want to help people who have similar value systems, who really want to make a dent in this space. So, I do things. Yeah, I do in my free time, the stuff.
I do.
What's this?
Things.
What's this thing you speak of? Free time. Can you explain
Free
that?
time. You know what? I will tell you that this past year, 2020, put a lot of stuff in perspective for me. It was not the year I wanted, but it was the year I needed. And I have dramatically reprioritized my health. I definitely put on some COVID weight. I'm almost shedded all of my COVID weight, which I'm like,
Awesome.
Picked up cycling, really watching like what I eat, spending more time with like my husband, and, making genuine friendships. Like there were a lot of things that I was putting on hold because at one point I was so consumed by my work and I didn't have that balance. And I think for a lot of folks who are like in this transition piece, like there's this urge to say yes to every opportunity. And I argue like you really need to be selective on what you say yes to, because not everything is in your best interest. And those things take away energy. And I had depleted my energy, right? Like I had an empty cup and I was still trying to pour, oxygen into other people's cups. Like they're all the formula wasn't there. And it burned me out. It really did. And working for the VA as a comms professional, that'll take a toll. Like there's a lot of stuff that happens, and then you're trying to run a business, and then you're in the Legion, you're doing all this stuff, and then something's got to give. Right.
Well, there's been this ongoing conversation on LinkedIn that I'm so happy is happening, and it's been happening for a number of years now. And it is this narrative that being really, really busy is not cool. It's not important. It's not good. But also that there are the memes that float around that you're working 70-hour work weeks, 80-hour work weeks for an employer that will replace you in 6 hours if you quit or died. And so it's putting those things into perspective, that you have a life, you have a family. Those are important things. That's time you'll never get back. You can still do your job effectively. You can still be effective at your work without always being in your work. And so, yeah, absolutely. You got to find that balance. Otherwise, you lose perspective, and potentially you lose more than just perspective. You lose the things that are most important.
I tell folks all the time that it was like, I've had a really bumpy road. Like I'm telling you the very easy, like peasy, like, oh, wow, it all worked out for her. No, like I unfortunately am a statistic of military sexual trauma. I have had depression. I have had anxiety. I, have really had this like overachiever bug in me for a long time. And like, I was equating titles and positions and accolades and all of these things to like, kind of like be my confidence and self-worth. And like, that will only take you so far when you don't have an underlying understanding of yourself and what makes you happy. Right. So like, I put a lot of emphasis on like work Ashley, and work Ashley was killing it, but like non-work Ashley was suffering because of it. And like, again, finding that balance, right? Like I've had peaks and valleys. Like I've had to make a lot of sacrifices to do some of the stuff that I've done, or relationships. Like there were things that I completely cut out because I was so consumed with like what I thought the definition of success was. And now as a young professional, a little bit more seasoned and figuring it out, I bestow the pearl of wisdom onto others. Like success is subjective, excuse me. Sounds cooler when I say it correctly, right? But so it really is. And I think that we're so caught up, and we're all on social media now. Like I've kind of curtailed a lot of like my content creation. Like I just think that there's too much pressure on folks right now to like constantly be like creating and like doing things. And I'm just like, man, like I guess that kind of worked for like COVID. Like you want to still show that you're doing stuff, but now I'm just kind of like, I need to like go be with people, not always have a phone in my face. Like I've put restrictions on my phone. Like my phone shuts off after 7:00. I don't take business calls after 7:00. Like there were things I had to do from like a self-discipline standpoint, and that I would encourage the entire military community to look at, because everyone thinks it's like, you know, they'll hear my story and they're like, oh, wow, she's got her stuff together. It didn't happen overnight. Okay. Like it's a lot of trial and error. Transition was tough. Like I got out in 2019, November. I mean, I spent my first Veterans Day, you know, isolated at home, and like that's, you know, I had one of my soldiers, like he was like, hey G, just wanted to wish you happy Veterans Day, and I was like, I cried. Like I was so emotional, because like this is a young man that I helped tremendously throughout my time in. But you know, it was interesting because like I, up to the day that I was trying to like get out, was trying to commission, and like for me it didn't work out, and that's okay. Like at one point I kept the blinders up and I thought that was going to be it. Like I was going to be like Lieutenant Gorbulja, and that didn't happen, and that's okay. And I think like coming to terms with things and letting things like be as they are, and that like it's not a failure. Like failure is not final, and that, you know, if things don't work out, like other doors open, and they did. Like I didn't expect that same year, a few months later, finishing my master's, that I'd get a call from the then, you know, veteran benefit, you know, secretary and his acting chief of staff, and say, hey, we want to make you a job. We want you to move out to DC. Right. I was like, oh yeah, wow. Ooh,
I can do that.
I can do that. Okay, let's do it. You know, who would have thought?
Well, and to your point about, you know, not commissioning, for example, like you got to think about this, and again, everything put into perspective. The vast majority of people in America never signed up in the first place. You know, never attempted to commit their lives to military service, for example.
Right.
So even that alone, you know, there are all those things. There are things that I wish I could go back and do. I talked to some of my friends who stayed in beyond. I did 4 years in the Marine Corps, and you know, I talked to my friends who stayed in for 8 years, and they went and did all these amazing, cool things that I never knew were opportunities. And so, you know, hindsight is 20/20. I wish I could go back and change that, but you just keep moving forward. And I think it's an evolution too. You'd probably look back on this conversation in 10 years and say, you know, even then I thought I had it all figured out, and I didn't have it all figured out. And that is, you know, you have setbacks too. If you ever change jobs, or a job goes away, or something about your job changes, and those can be setbacks. Your responsibilities change,
right?
Or maybe they're not setbacks; they're challenges. Maybe that's a better way to put it. But those are all things that, you know, challenges. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger, so to speak. You know,
I always I like the quote, like, you know, what was it? I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt said something about like. Like if you put a woman in hot water, it's just like, or women are like a tea bag, you put them in hot water and like amazing things happen, or something like that. I don't know. It's, again, like, it'd be cooler if I could actually say it correctly, but it's really about like
quotes.
Yes. Ooh. Like you don't know how strong you are until strong is your only option, or resilience is your only option.
Yeah.
And I think what's great, at least, you know, just from my service story, is like everything was adapt and overcome, right? Move and communicate. Like you have to be able to do those things, you know, with perspective, and learning how to work with people, and all of those skills, those things all transfer into my everyday job, and helping folks figure out how to articulate that and find like that niche that they want. It'll take time. Like I don't tell people it happens instantaneously. It's a very rare person who knows exactly what they want to do, and they're like ready to go. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay.
That
Absolutely.
Communicate piece is one of those pieces that I wish we could teach that more in corporate America, because I find myself implementing that every day. Execute. You know, I do. I don't want to spend 6 months planning and 1 month executing. I want to spend 6 months executing and 1 month planning.
Right.
And so we tend to get bogged down in these things. And that's it's interesting. A whole other topic of conversation for those of us who have served in the military. It's an interesting perspective because in my experience, corporate America moves slow. We don't always execute quickly. We don't always want to go ahead and employ the tools that we need to employ. We're going to sit back and think about it for a minute. So it does. It creates challenges. And some of those challenges might put you in good positions. Some of them might put you in tough positions. But
Right.
again, it's all an evolution. And we've got all this, hopefully we've got all this time to figure it all out. And probably by the end, by the time you're, hanging up your suit and retiring, you've never accomplished all the things you want to.
Yeah.
It
And I
just
think
constantly evolves.
there's got to be like peace within yourself and like knowing what you can and cannot control. My husband tells me all the time, he goes, Ashley, the only thing you can't control is how you react.
Mhm.
And, even now working for like the VA too, like I don't get too attached to my projects. Like I'm very passionate about them, but I don't take, things too personal because I know like, obviously, there's always going to be bureaucratic red tape. There was like that in the military. It's like that sometimes even with some of my clients, like it's like that in the Legion sometimes too. Like let's be honest, it's everywhere. It's not like this is just a military thing or a corporate thing. It's how do we move with a purpose? And how do we get folks to listen? Like I couldn't tell you how many times I may have been like one of the only women in the room. And at least in the military perspective, like, I spoke up every time because at the end of the day, like if I didn't say anything, that's on me. But if I say something and they don't listen, that's on them. And that's the same way I feel when, I was, back in the office and seeing people face to face, and I'd walk in with my red power jacket and they'd be like, who is this person? And I'd be like, hi, I'm Ashley. Here, things up today.
Yep.
Yeah. But, little things.
Right.
Yeah. Ashley brought up, understanding what you can and can't control. And the one thing you can is your emotions. Before we started recording, we were all kind of sharing, stories of the wedding days individually. You guys both had similar situations where it was raining the days leading up to the wedding. The day of, thankfully for both of you, it just happened to be, blue skies and sunny and beautiful day. And then the very next day it goes right back to raining. Had that not broke that way for you folks or anybody out there, there are plenty of people out there that would have had a literal breakdown. They would have, uncontrollably got emotional over it. There is nothing you can do in that situation. And that's kind of a metaphor for life in general. It's you have no control over so many things. What you do control is your emotions and how you put yourself out there to the world. So
Absolutely.
I like to try to keep that in the back of my head.
And we're taking on the risk of being in an outdoor wedding. So there's a certain element of, I understand the risk here. Ashley, I know you've got to go. Tim, you want to wrap us up here?
Yeah, absolutely. Ashley, thank you very much for joining us today. Anybody that is interested, go over, check out Tango Alpha Lima. It is the American Legion podcast. Ashley is a co-host over there with Mark and Jeff. Check them out. You can find them on Apple Podcasts, and I'm sure on all the other podcast platforms as well. So Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure talking to you. Would love to have you back on, and we can talk a little bit more about what you're doing with the VA now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be more than happy to.
Fantastic. Matt, anything else before we get out of here?
No, I think we're looking forward to some, on my end, we're looking forward to some baseball tournaments this weekend. So I'm going to be out in the sun quite a bit, but appreciate the conversation.
Where's I did 24 miles on the bike on Sunday and I'm burnt.
Fine.
I was going to say, break out the SPF.
Burnt.
Right. Ashley, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll have you on again sometime soon.
All righty.
So,
well, I appreciate the time.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find us on all the major social media platforms as well as podcast platforms. To all the fathers out there, I wanted to bring this up early in the podcast. If you're a father, I hope you had a great Father's Day. And to all the veterans out there, we love you. We appreciate you. And thank you for your service. We'll see you right back here next time on the Beyond the Wire podcast.